Okay, so we'll start the recording. So returning back to my original declaration regarding how vision, how the visual sense and the use of our eyes is habitually ingrained in every action that we do. And every action that we do, it means that our entire self-image, so if someone asked me about what does the self-image actually mean, and I can tell you what it means for me. So for me, the self-image is a way to describe that that myself, my nervous system is constructing the sense of who I am with all of the possible associations related to it. So it includes the body image, knowing where my body is in space and in relation to itself and its size and all the sensations from my body. But for me, the self-image includes also, you know, my personal history, the social and cultural context in which I live in. So for me, the self-image is a very, very broad, holistic, complete image to describe who I am, and how I sense myself. And the self-image, one needs to remember that our self-image is not wired in. And not only is it not wired in, even after it has been constructed through years of experience, it is still being constructed in the moment. Our nervous system, our brain, the way we produce intention and action, not only one can say, oh, it reinforces the habits that are already there, which is true, but to reinforce the habits that are there, you need to keep creating and recreating the habits all the time. So I just saw today a study that showed on a very, isolated and a very, very specific level in the neural circuitry, not in the entire processing of the brain, but something very, very specific in the somatosensory cortex of how the same stimulation with the same stimulation in terms of the impulse and the force of the stimulation creates a different response in how the brain processes that stimulation. Even though it's continuous and it's like the same sound or the same electrical impulse to the same nerve, each time it comes into the brain does something a little bit different with it. Which means that even when I look at my room, which I've been looking at since whatever, for years, the way I perceive the room is not the same. It continuously changes because it needs to be continuously constructed. It's not like a computer program where it's just wired in or burned into the disk and it's there, and every time you make access to that computer program, you will extract the exact same information. Our brain does not work like that. It's a living organ, it's a living organism that needs to continuously, it doesn't design itself from scratch, but whatever it accumulated and whatever habits that it acquired, it continuously needs to feed those habits and to maintain their existence. So it's a continuous work in progress. Now the self-image is continuously being constructed in relation to our environment. It is not separate in any way, on any level, from our physical surrounding. And what is the first basic requirement for an organism to be able to function in its own living environment, in its own surrounding, right? One of them, maybe or if not probably yeah, probably the first requirement is to know the orientation, to know where it is in relation to its environment. Otherwise, it's completely passive and it cannot have any choice or any reaction in relation to anything in the environment. So knowing where the hot stream of water is coming from, that's already orientation, right? Sensing that there's more, whatever, salt concentration on the right, that already gives you orientation. So as we saw, I'll share my my PowerPoint thing. So as we saw, vision in its most, yeah, so here we can see the gradation and the evolution of, why am I not large light? Oops. Yeah, okay. So as we saw last time, the beginning of light detection comes from light-sensitive proteins that can detect light. And once the organism is a multicellular organism, specific cells become designated to have and carry those light-sensitive proteins, and they become photoreceptors. Once these photoreceptors are clustered into one area on the membrane, but then the membrane creates this indent and closes. You see the middle picture, how the indent or the pit closes around the photoreceptors. It constricts or it restricts the way light can enter into the pit. And therefore, by the direction of the light, only certain photoreceptors would be stimulated. So this already gives the potential for that organism to orient itself. Of course, all of this light detection is useless if you can't move in relation to the light. If you can't create a visual-driven behavior, then all of these photoreceptors and this whole mechanism is useless. So of course, with more visual perception, develops a greater nervous system that can actually make sense of that information and use it to guide behavior in a more efficient way. But once light comes into that pit, stimulating different photoreceptors, orientation becomes very, very, very significant, because then you can know not only front to back, because already here you can know front to back. There are pigments that block the light from certain directions. So you would know when light is coming from in front of you versus when it's coming from behind you. But once you have a pit and the light, let's see the light, oops. Let's see the light shining. Sorry, don't get dizzy. Yeah, let's see the light shining from, that's right. So the light shining into the pit from different directions would stimulate different photoreceptors. So you now not only have front and back, you also have right and left, or maybe further down or further up, depending on the orientation of the organism to its environment. Yeah. Okay. So what were the next evolutionary steps that enabled the vision to be even more acute, to have higher resolution and to have more details, that the perception of the visual stimulation can be even more detailed? So of course, one of them was to make the hole into the pit smaller, but then creating a lens that would concentrate the light that comes in, so that it would be, so the lens can collect more light, which is focused better on particular photoreceptors. So these are all the evolutionary steps of the eyes of, what is it? I think different, yeah. So this is the complex eye of an octopus. So the fossil evidence for Complex eyes goes back to about 550 million years ago. So a complex eye is not new. Visual guided behavior is not new. The advantages, hold on, just a second. So visually guided behavior is not new, and the advantages of knowing your orientation in space and to be able to visually perceive more and more details in relation to your surrounding also is not new. So what other advances were there in the eye that enabled vision to be more and more acute and differentiated? So one of them is the lens that can concentrate, that can collect more light from the surrounding, but then concentrate it in a more accurate way on the photoreceptors. The other development was that instead of just having a very small opening with a lens, how about being able to control that opening so that when there is less light, you can increase the aperture of the opening to allow more light to come in. So that is actually how the iris controls the pupil. So let's see some of these. Yeah, so we'll look at some pictures that describe it. So this is your eye. All the photoreceptors are on the back, on the interior, posterior part of the eyeball, lining the posterior part, creating the retina. And the light goes in from this small hole, which again dates back, just the hole itself, the creation of the pit and the hole itself dates back to 600 or 700 million years back. The lens that is able to bend the light and control the light bending, so it collects a lot of light but then focuses it on particular areas of the retina. Oops. Yeah, so here we see two different types of complex eyes that again are very, 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 very old, but both have a lens, both have photoreceptors in the back, both have this pit that allows for detection of the direction of the light. Oh, I'm going backwards, sorry. Good. Okay, so if you have a lens that can bend light and shine the light in specific length on the retina, if you attach some muscles to that lens, that gives you another incredible advantage. Because if the lens is thicker, more bulgier, it bends the light in a different way from when the lens is thinner. And we're not going to go into the optics of how light bends when it travels through the lens, but just to understand that now when there's control over the thickness of the lens, when you can make the lens thinner or bulgier, meaning you can change the focus of your vision, it gives you not only the orientation towards where you're looking at, but it also enables you to have more depth. So the perception of depth starts with the ability to change the thickness of the lens to enable you to see in a more focused way objects that are closer to you, but also to focus on objects that are further away. And I think I have, yeah, this is another image of the same idea. So if you're looking far away from you, towards a tree or a mountain, from far away, the light rays come in a parallel way into your eye, and the lens bends those rays in a way that they fall together on the same spot on the retina. But when you're looking at something close to you, there's also a lot of light from projecting from that object away to the sides. So you need a different thickness of the lens in order to be able to converge the light rays in the same way. So again, their convergence would fall on the retina and not forward of the retina or behind the retina, because then you don't have focal vision. And there are actually muscles, intrinsic. So the eye has intrinsic muscles that are really, they originate and terminate within the eye itself. And those muscles control the thickness of the lens and also the opening of your pupil. Is your pupil wide or narrow? That's also controlled by intrinsic muscles inside the eye. So we're going to have a look at just a short look at these intrinsic muscles. So there are muscles that are connected to the lens, and when they contract, the ciliary muscles, when they contract, the lens becomes thicker. And that's what we do when we read something, right? When we're reading a book, we're doing a few things, but one of the things that we're doing is that we're contracting those muscles that are attached to the lens, and the lens becomes thicker, so it enables us to look at things up close. Part of the reason why reading for many hours or looking at screens, part of the reason why it tires the eye is because these muscles are they're very small, but they're continuously working. In their relaxed position, the lens becomes flatter, and that's what happens when we look towards something that is far away from us. So thinking about looking at the line of the horizon, just sitting there with your eyes closed, thinking of looking at the line of the horizon already relaxes the muscles that control the thickness of the lens. Not only those muscles, but even those little muscles within the eye are affected by just thinking about looking far away at the horizon. Yeah, so this is a similar diagram. When the ciliary muscles contract, the lens becomes thicker. When the ciliary muscles relax, the lens becomes thinner. So again, looking out towards the horizon in terms of the muscles that control the lens actually relaxes those muscles. And again, it's the same, right? Yeah, ciliary muscles contracted, the lens becomes thicker. Relaxed, the lens becomes thinner. Same thing. I don't know why I put the same diagram 4 times. Now, the other intrinsic muscles of the eye are the ones that control the opening, how much light would come into the eye, right? So there is a sphincter muscle. So the iris is made up, the colored part of our eye is made up of 2 muscles. One of them is a circulary, like a sphincter-like muscle, and the other one is a radial muscle that has all the fibers going out to the side. So the circular muscle, when it contracts, it narrows the opening. It's like the aperture of, well, who knows today, the old cameras had an aperture and a shutter. So it reduces the diameter of the aperture, so less light comes in. But then when you need more light, if you're in a darker environment, the other muscle contracts, the radial muscle contracts, and it pulls that circular muscle out to the side, and you have a bigger opening to allow more light to enter your eye. Yeah, maybe we'll look at that later. So Mm, right. So one of the important things to understand, to think about this mechanism is that it's all related to what's in front of you, right? Everything that is in front of you that enters your eye, the amount of light and the distance of the object that is in front of you, you're engaging with that part of the environment, not only, but also through these intrinsic muscles in the eye that control how much air, how much light would come into your eye and control the bending of the lens so you can focus on something that is close or something that is far. So now it's not only, again, it's not only orientation in space and directionality towards which part of your environment you're looking at, but you're also relating to the direction of your orientation in the dimension of depth. Okay. Um, and again, this is not something new. These mechanisms have evolved millions and millions of years ago. Yeah. Okay. Great. And we'll keep. Yeah. We'll take another step forward after the ATM. Okay. So we're gonna do. We're gonna start with. Just want you to get. You have a few minutes to prepare yourself for the ATM. So we're gonna start standing, and then we're gonna do the lesson on the floor, and we might be doing a part of the lesson standing on our hands and knees. So if you know you need something to cushion underneath your knees when standing on your hands and knees, so have something by your side that you wouldn't need to, get up and get something. So you can get it now, have it by your side, and if you'll need it, it would be there waiting for you. So take a minute and a half to organize your space, and if you can direct your camera onto your mat so I can see a little bit of you, that will be nice.
Raz, there's a trade-off between the backlight effect and the darkness. I think this is the better way for you.
Oh, I thought about the visual evolution aspect. back to reality. Okay. I was thinking like 500 million years ago. That's okay. That's right. As long as that's okay. Thank you, Carrie. Okay, so please come standing up. And if you have a dominant light source in the room, like a big window, make sure you're standing either in front of it with your facing the window or with your back to the window, but not with your side. So you wouldn't feel there's more light coming from the right than from the left. Okay, so that wouldn't bias your perception. Right. And now just take a minute to stand comfortably, simply, as simply and as unorchestrated or choreographed as you can. If you knew nothing about nothing and you would just be somehow lowered gently, slowly down from the sky, and your feet would contact the floor and all of your weight would be on your feet. Just like that. The simplest possible standing and with your eyes closed. And just notice an interesting thing. Where is forward? Not the geometrical forward that you know from knowing your space and the room, but your kinesthetic or your body position forward orientation. And notice if your forward is a little bit biased to the right or to the left. If you're not doing anything to position forward right in front of you. If you think of forward as a zone, not as a spot, not as a geometrical objective point. How do you perceive your orientation to the front? And does it feel like one eye maybe is more oriented towards that front? That one eye is engaged in a clearer way or differently, sensing where forward is than the other eye? And it's a funny question because we take forward to be completely for granted. But in fact, our brain continuously needs to construct the orientation of ourselves in relation to our environment. It needs to continuously construct the map of our physical surrounding. Good. Now cover one eye with its hand. Cover one eye. That's right. So no light enters that eye. No light at all. And just keep thinking about where forward is. But again, if you were not to do anything, if you were just to let your eye rest in the orbits and you would just let your torso and your pelvis just stand simply, would you actually prefer forward to be a little bit towards that eye that is not covered? Or maybe towards the other way? Now, switch hands and notice, how do you perceive forward with this eye? Is it a mirror image of the other eye? Or does it have some sort of bias of its own? Mhm. Right. And then switch again. And of course, don't fixate your gaze or your thinking on a particular point. Exactly the contrary. If you were as if though not to do anything, what would be the natural, or well, it's more the habitual. What would be the habitual orientation of forward with this eye covered and the other exposed? And again, how is that different if you switch? Is one eye maybe more oriented forward and the other a little bit out to the side? And you switch as many times as you need so you can compare between the different sensations. Do you turn a little bit when you cover one eye? And maybe do you turn more when you cover one eye and less when you cover the other? It's a funny question. It's such a funny question that it's hard to articulate the question. Good. And maybe it will become, if it's not clear now, maybe it will become clear during the lesson. So come lie on your back. And take a moment just to sense your contact with the floor. The weight of your legs on the floor. The weight of your arms, your elbows, your hands. The weight of your pelvis. Your spine. The weight of your chest. The weight of your breathing. Good. And of course, if you need to have your feet standing, if you're more comfortable with your feet standing on the floor, you can always stand your feet. And now keep your eyes closed and bring both arms in front of you towards the ceiling. And as we did last week, fold your fingers lightly so your hands are like in this thumb up position, right? Like you're giving a 2 thumbs up. But orient the thumbs so that your nails are facing the front of your eyes. But don't open your eyes and don't touch one hand with the other. And just try to feel, can you really position the middle of the nail of your left thumb in front of your left eye? But keep your hands forward. Keep your hands forward. And can you position the middle of the nail of the right thumb right in front of your right eye, right in front of your pupil? of the right eye. Right, and then you do these, most of you, I think, are already doing these spontaneous, as if those, well, not really, doing these little adjustments, little adjustments to feel, wait a second. Do I really know where my thumb is? Is that really in front of my eye? But don't open your eyes and don't do big movements. And don't try to fix it so much to be correct. And after you've taken a moment to sense, and you think you're pretty sure that each thumb is in front of the middle of its eye, open your eyes and look where you positioned your thumb. Is it really in front of your eyes, or is it more in front of your cheeks? And is that the distance between both eyes, or is it wider? Good, and then close your eyes again. Right, and just sense where your left thumb is. Right, how do you know what's in front of you? What's in front of you in terms of orientation and direction? Of course, you know that the thumbs are in front of you, but where is really in front of you? And how accurate is your perception of in front of you? Good. And you'll see that the smaller the changes that you will do, the more time you would take to notice it. In a funny way, it would somehow become more inaccurate. That actually the uncertainty of where exactly is forward would be exposed. Right? Just like sometimes in standing, you need to take a long moment until you feel, oh, right, my pelvis is a little bit turned. I didn't notice it in the first instant that I stood up, but now that I'm taking the time to sense myself, oh my God, yeah, my one hip is a little forward of the other, right? So the same principle here, if you just take this quiet moment to sense forward, you might feel that, it's a little bit hard to have 100% certainty about the position, even though you would think, oh, our eyes, we use them so extensively and they're such a conscious part of our self-use, and the thumbs as well. They're so well represented in our brain, our hands and our fingers. And still, just like we do not necessarily organize ourselves on the vertical line, the skeletal relationships on the vertical line are not necessarily organized in the most optimal way, so is our construction of orientation in space, our perception of the most fundamental direction of forward. Or maybe constructed in a habitual way that has some inaccuracies in it. Good. And bring your arms down and lie on your stomach. And see if you can lie with one hand on top of the other and your forehead on the upper hand. If it's not comfortable for you, in the bones of your hand or the pressure on your forehead, you can put something between your hands and your forehead so your forehead is a little bit cushioned. And make sure your knees and feet are comfortably apart, that they're not too close to each other. That's right. And now just listen to your breathing. Just listen to how air enters your lungs and how the air exits your lungs. And don't do any drastic interference with the pace of your breathing, the depth of your breathing, the amount of the volume of air that you take in and breathe out. So breathing stays very simple. All right. And now very gently, see if you can, but really very, very gently, direct your breathing so that you can feel that you're expanding your abdomen. It doesn't have to be a deep inhalation, but make sure that every time you inhale, you can feel how your stomach pushes a little bit against the floor from being inflated from the inside by the movement of the inhalation. Good. And notice that this expansion of the abdomen is also forward. It's forward into the floor. It also has a forward sort of orientation to it. And notice an interesting thing. Are you somehow looking towards your stomach? Is there some visual component in sensing the movement of your abdomen? Is there an ocular engagement, meaning an involvement of your eyes in paying attention to the sensation of how your stomach pushes into the floor? Right. And is one eye more engaged than the other? And does one side of your abdomen expand a little bit more than the other side? Right. Now, I'm going to describe another thing that is happening, and you just notice if your eyes are following the description. Right? So as your abdomen expands and pushes a little bit into the floor when you inhale, can you sense that your vertebral column, that your spine moves a little bit backwards? Because in fact, the floor doesn't move forward when you expand your abdomen. But by pushing the floor forward, your spine, mostly your lumbar spine, but not only, moves a little bit away from the floor. Now, did you notice that your eyes moved in some way just from shifting your attention to the movement of your spine? And again, notice, does one side of your abdomen expand more than the other? Does one side of your back move further backwards than the other? Good. Now, if you turn your head a little bit towards that side, a little bit towards the side that you feel that there's a little bit more movement or a little bit of a clearer movement. So instead of having the middle of your forehead on your hand, you lift your head, you turn it just 5 degrees towards that side where you feel more movement, and you place your forehead on your hands in that 5-degree turning. So now your face is oriented a little bit towards the side where you feel that there's a little bit more movement. And you just keep on doing that same simple breathing, inhaling into your abdomen. And notice again, are you watching your abdomen predominantly with one eye? Is somehow one eye more engaged in following the sensations of how your abdomen expands? And is it the same eye on that side, or is it the opposite eye? Good. Now try doing the same thing to the other side. Turn your head a little bit to the other side. Switch eyes and pay attention to this side of your stomach and just notice the difference. Just see if you can detect that, on one side there was more movement with a clearer connection to one eye, and now reversing the direction, something doesn't fully reverse. It doesn't copy itself it doesn't mirror itself to the other side. Good, and then switch back again to the original side of the head, original orientation. Think again about that original side of the stomach. And just notice again, if something is clearer, not only in the movement of the abdomen, but in how your attention is being directed towards that movement, towards that sensation. That just sensing the movement of your abdomen and your spine already involves directionality. The sensing of it, the paying attention to it, involves directionality, which means it has a particular orientation that is inseparable from your eyes, and it has some sort of a visual component to it, even though your eyes are closed, even though you can't see your stomach visually, but that it's not only a kinesthetic sensory appreciation of what you're doing, and that there's somehow a visual component to it. Great. And turn again and come lie on your back again. Rest for a moment on your back. And if you think of it, for a newborn baby, it takes some time to associate the orientation of the eyes, visual perception, and what's in front of you, right? Constructing the orientation of what's in front of you. So a newborn baby lying on his stomach doesn't have his head lying on his hands as you just did. The head is turned to the right or to the left. But that pressure from the chest, the abdomen, from the limbs onto the floor, right? Gravitation working on pressing the skeleton, the skin into the floor is already giving the seeds of orienting front and back or forward and back. Right, and just bring your arms in front of you again. And your thumbs in that thumbs up position. Your eyes are closed. And just sense again. So this is a more, we might say this is a more habitual, way of orienting your attention towards forward, right? We look forward towards our hands are in front of our face many hours during the day. So this is more habitual. Thinking about the abdomen expanding forward, pushing the floor is, of course, a little bit less habitual. Just notice your perception of your thumbs now after what you did on the stomach, right? Supposedly completely unrelated. But I would say, well, you were thinking forward and down because you were thinking about your stomach, but you were continuously thinking forward. Engaging your visual system and your visual perception. Good. And turn again back onto your stomach. And this time, prop yourself up on your elbows and forearms into the, what some call the Sphinx position. And of course, whenever you need to rest, if you feel that it's too intense for you, your shoulders, back, neck, whatever, each one with the stuff that he carries. So of course, whenever you need to rest, just put your head back down on the floor and rest. And just organize your elbows so they're really underneath your shoulders, right? So your arms are as close to vertical as possible. That's right. And look forward, more or less, in front of you. That's right. And just feel the expansion of your abdomen again. Very lightly, think about breathing into your stomach. Very, very simple. Very simple. That's right. And you would see a very interesting thing as your stomach pushes forward, it actually moves your spine, your sacrum, a little bit backwards. Right, and if you allow your skeleton and your spine to be influenced by how the abdomen expands, you would notice that it actually orients your eyes. That just that expansion of your abdomen brings your eyes a little bit downwards towards the floor. That's right, and it can be a very small movement. That's right, but just that expansion of your abdomen, moving your lumbar vertebrae a little bit backwards as if though you're starting to fold, as if though you're elongating your spine. That's right, and every time you feel that skeletal movement from expanding your abdomen, you can add a little bit intentionally, just adding just a little bit by lowering your head, folding your chest a little bit, helping your lumbar lordosis to flatten a little bit backwards, helping your tail to tilt towards your feet. Just the tiniest bit. Just the tiniest bit. That's right. So it would just emphasize that directionality of forward and down, how the eyes come a little bit down towards the floor and a little bit down underneath yourself, as if though you want to look underneath your chest. Just the tiniest bit. That's right. Good. And rest on your stomach for a moment. Rest again on your stomach. And slowly come up to lean on your hands and knees. And again, if you need some cushioning for your knees, you can either fold your mat or put something underneath your knees so you can be comfortable in that position. That's right. Make sure your hands are not too close to your knees and not too far away. That your knees are not tight together and not too far spread apart. Good. And now very gently round your back a little bit towards the ceiling, just the tiniest bit, so that it would direct your head as if though you're looking down on the floor towards your knees. That's right, very simply, in a very simple way. And every time you bring your head a little bit forward and up, you allow your spine to sink forward towards the floor, your abdomen protrudes forward. That's right. And then again, use your entire spine. Think of your entire spine like a chain that mobilizes the position of your head, that orients your head a little bit downwards and a little bit upwards. That's right. And notice if you're thinking about your spine, thinking about the movement between the vertebrae, how is that different from thinking about your stomach? Right, and again, notice even though your spine is behind you and you can't see it, and not only behind you, it's inside of you, are you somehow using your eyes? Good. And rest on your stomach again. Rest on your stomach. And prop yourself up again on your elbows and forearms. And then again, use the inhalation, use the expansion of your stomach to initiate that movement of looking as if though looking down underneath you, as if though you're scanning the floor to look underneath your chest and your belly button. Right. And now again, and this is a funny question, and I'm not sure I'm asking it in the most, accurate or precise or intelligible way. But if you were allow yourself to do the movement in a very, very spontaneous way, meaning that you're not directing it to a particular point or direction. Would you say that you're following a straight line underneath you that is right in front of your nose, right in front of your sternum, right in front of the middle of your pubic bone? Would that represent the sensation of your movement, direction, orientation? Would that represent the forward trajectory of your gaze? Or is the line a little bit a diagonal one? A little bit towards one hip or the other? Maybe a little bit towards one elbow or the other? And which eye would you say is following that line in a more dominant, more perceivable way? And it's a funny question because it demands of you, and of course you can rest on your stomach for a moment, rest on your stomach or on your back. So it's a funny question because it demands a few things. Not only being very, very sensitive to what you do, of course that's a fundamental requirement, but it also demands taking into account that forward is a zone and not a particular point in space. And it also requires of you, even though you're intentionally doing the movement, it's an intentional action, to somehow allow yourself. See, I don't have the words. I don't. It's a funny question that I can't find the words to how to ask it. Anyway, whenever you feel ready, you try again. And you try to feel that, yes, there are these constraints, the floor in front of you, leaning on the elbows, of course. But if you do not direct yourself intentionally to a particular point or a particular trajectory, you somehow allow the movement to be, I don't know, spontaneously shaped. But of course, how can we talk about spontaneity in this situation? I don't know, it's funny. But as if though it was spontaneously shaped by something that is habitually directing it, but is always in the background of our consciousness. Could you feel that it's as if though, yeah, that made sense, Carrie? That's a thumbs up. Yeah, sheesh. Thank goodness I have ears to ventilate the smoke coming out of my brain, that it doesn't have to go out of my eyes. But does it feel like it's not completely geometrically straightforward, but there's actually a tendency or a preference towards maybe one hip, that maybe one side of the back rounds backwards more than the other, that a line on the floor best representing this spontaneous, habitual background organization is maybe diagonal or C-shaped or curved, and that it's actually one eye directing the situation in a more predominant way than the other. Now, if you can find that, wow. Because it's there all the time. Our front is biased. Our orientation is habitually constructed in a particular way, which is not 100% pure geometrical, symmetrical. And of course, our back and our spine is a little bit twisted and bent. Good. And lie on your back again and rest on your back. Good, and bring both arms in front of you again, holding your thumbs forward in front of your eyes. And just notice if something is different, maybe simpler, maybe clearer in the perception of forward of each thumb, each eye. Great. And bring your arms down. And come leaning on your hands and knees again. Good. And again, same idea. You use your entire self to scan the floor underneath you, as if though you're looking a little bit down towards your knees and then a little bit forward on the floor. You don't necessarily need to move, scan or move your eyes forward of your hands. You can even go forward all the way to looking at the wall in front of you. But again, you don't have to do a large movement. You want to be in that range that, again, you might be able to feel that actually scanning the line on the floor, the line is not completely straight. It's actually a diagonal line. That if the line were to represent your habitual organization, and not that you and your organization need to conform to a straight line. Get it? That's not the thing. We could have put a stick on the floor and said, okay, just follow the stick. But that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to use that image of the line in such a way that it would represent you, not a straight geometrical shape, right? And now, if you feel that one eye is scanning the line in a more predominant way, turn your head a little bit. So that eye would be a little bit forward of the other. So if you feel that it's the left eye, turn your head just a little bit to the right. If you feel that it's the right eye, turn your head just a little bit to the left. As if though you're neutralizing one eye and accentuating the predominant eye. That's right. And again, do you really need to take the line in between your knees or actually towards one knee? And does that make sense in how you round your back, maybe more on one side than the other? Now, of course, if you're not sure, try switching. Use the other eye and switch the diagonal. And you might, by comparison, realize that, oh my God, yes, one eye scanning, that using one eye to scan a diagonal line is much more you than using the other eye scanning the opposite diagonal. Right, so we're not involving ourselves at all in trying to change anything, but just to expose how there's something habitual about how we orient ourselves forward, how we perceive. Great. And lie on your back again and rest. Right, and bring both arms in front of you again. Hold both thumbs, each thumb in front of its respective eye. And And just notice if these funny things that we were doing, are they somehow affecting or influencing or clarifying or improving something in this simple alignment that you would think would be so trivial? Like, why even bother with paying attention to such a simple thing? But as we saw, the inaccuracies in our perception of forward Great. And slowly bring your arms down. And slowly roll up through one side and come to sitting. All right, and stay seated for a moment. See if you can sit. If you need to, if you're uncomfortable sitting on the floor, of course, you can sit on a chair. But if you can sit on the floor for a moment in a more or less symmetrical position. That's right. And again, close your eyes and bring both arms in front of you. Hold your thumbs in front of your eyes. Of course, your elbows, they don't need to be fully straight forward. You can have your elbows bend, hanging a little bit closer to you so you're not straining your shoulders so much. That's right. And just sense where forward is. And of course, it's not just your perception of the position of your thumb. And it's not just your perception of your position of your eye. It has to do somehow with your entire self-image related to orienting yourself towards your environment. That's right. And notice if you were to connect two strings, one from each eye to its respective thumb, if there was a string from the thumb to the pupil, are the strings the same length? If you were to measure the length, would it be the same length? Are those two strings parallel to each other? Are they in the same height? Is one tilted a little bit downwards in relation to the other? And of course, if you're really tempted to look at your thumbs and open your eyes, you can go ahead and do that, because you might feel like at one point you're so uncertain about where they are, or you might feel that you're 100% certain that you know where they are and you want to verify. You'll probably find a surprise. Good. And bring your arms down, slowly come up to standing. Right, and when you come up to standing, again, stand simply. Same orientation in the room as you were before, so you don't have light to the right or to the left of you. If you have a dominant light source in the room, right, and just stand simply and notice again, what does in front of you feel like? When you think of forward in front of you, what do you sense and see in your mind's eye? In your eye's eye, I don't know. It's not just your mind's eye. And again, is there a little bit of a bias? Does it feel like, oh, actually thinking about in front of me a little to the left is somehow more organic than thinking about the objective point in front of me, or in front of me and a little bit to the right? Mm-hmm. And then again, cover one eye. And notice, how does that, it's not the eye, how do you orient yourself to the front? How do you perceive in front of you when one eye is covered? And still, you don't have to change anything. Just try to expose the spontaneous or the habitual, which of course might have changed dramatically from the start, but we really never did anything to try to change anything. We were just trying to continuously expose if we have a particular bias, if something in our habitual orientation is directed in a way that we wouldn't necessarily think about. And then of course you can switch and notice, is it a mirror image, a mirror sensation? Or somehow the left eye has its forward orientation, which is in a particular direction, and the left eye has something else that's not a mirror of the right eye. That's right. Good. And walk around the room. Take a few moments for yourself. So it's impossible. Well, it's possible, but it's possibly impossible to talk about the eyes without going a little bit more into details about how about the evolution of the position of the eyes. So a complex eye, as we saw, that has a retina, that has a lens, that has all these muscles that can control the amount of air that goes into the eye and the what they call the accommodation of the lens in order to be able to see from afar and forward. What they call complex eye is very, very, very old. But throughout evolution, the eyes migrated from the sides of the head. They migrated forward towards the front of the head. When the eyes were on the sides of the head, each eye was seeing a different picture, right? So the right eye was seeing whatever was to the right of me, and the left eye was seeing whatever was to the left of me. So it's hard to say that everything, it wasn't driven visually, it wasn't driven in a forward sort of direction. But as the eyes migrated forward into the front of our face, it enabled a situation where both eyes have actually an overlapping picture of the environment. Not 100% accurate overlapping picture, but a good enough overlapping picture of the environment that, again, depth, that perception of forward and back, what's in front of me in terms of distance, becomes more and more accurate, or what is called stereoscopic vision. So the focusing element of the lens is one very, very important element. The other very important element for stereoscopic vision is to be able to orient the eyes towards the object to which you're looking at. So that's called convergence. So the changing in the shape of the lens is called accommodation, which is necessary for focal vision. or for adjusting your focus from near to far. And the other important action is the action of the movement of the eyeballs themselves, a little bit inwards or outwards towards the object, and that's called convergence, or the convergence angle of the eyes. So let's look at that a little bit, because it is so, it's happening, it is so happening there all the time in our visual system, in the direction, in the orientation of what's in front of us, that again, it's impossible to talk about vision without overlooking that aspect. And that orientation towards what's in front of us is so dominant, becomes so dominant in our self-image and in our self-perception, that again, it cannot be overlooked in relation to anything else that we're trying to do or think or change or perceive, right? So as I said last time, even when I'm sensing my right hip and it's not in front of me and I can't see it because inside my visual system is somehow involved, but my visual system is so habituated towards forward, towards what's in front of me, then how is it involved in relation to paying attention to things that are not in front of me, that are behind me or inside of me? It's a question. It's not something that I'm going to answer, but I'm just stating it as something that is habitually, continuously working within us all the time towards visual cues and towards non-visual cues. So let's look for a moment at, I'm going to share my screen again, and let's look at the movement of the convergence of the eyes. Oops, sorry. Great. Okay, so apart from, okay, so what we see in this picture, the eyes are, or the axis, the forward axis of the pupil is forward, more or less parallel to each other. And this is the position of the eyes when we look towards something that is really far. If we look towards the horizon, that is the position that our eyes assume in relation to each other. Now, if you hold out your thumb in front of you, right in front of your nose, this time with your eyes open, but you focus on the wall in front of you, not on your thumb. You look away from your thumb and you focus on the wall in front of you. What you will notice is that you see your thumb twice. Assuming you have stereoscopic vision, right? That both of your eyes are functioning. Some people see just out of one eye, so they wouldn't see two thumbs. But if you have stereoscopic vision, binocular vision, and you look beyond your thumb towards the wall in front of you or out the window towards a tree, and your thumb is right in front of you, you would see your thumb twice. Okay, so that's called double vision. So that's the picture that we see above. So this, it represents a tree, but it can represent your thumb, but then you're not looking at your thumb, you're looking at the horizon, or you're trying to focus towards something that is behind your thumb. So then you have one image of the tree, or the way the light from the tree enters your eye and falls on your retina. It falls on the left side of your retina, on your left eye, and then it falls on the right side of your retina, on your right eye. So you have two images of the tree on your retina. But then if you look towards your, again, bring your thumb forward, and now look on your thumb, focus on your thumb, and then again focus on the wall behind your thumb, away from you. and then focus again on your thumb, and then again away from you. It's very hard to sense that you're actually doing something with your eyes, because it is so reflexive and habitual. But in fact, you are. Every time you try to focus on your thumb, again, assuming you have vision from both eyes, you actually turn your eyes a little bit inwards, like a movement of adduction, right? Or medial rotation of both eyes. So then you can see that the way the projection of the tree onto the retina in relation to the axis coming out of the right pupil versus the left pupil is very, very similar. And so the position of the image on the retina on each eye is so close to each other that then the brain can fuse those two pictures into one, and you see a single object. It deletes the double vision. I think I have another, yeah. So this is another nice example of understanding it. So the eyes are focusing towards the eyes are directed and focused not on the red spot, something further away from the red spot. And that's why the red spot, the image of the red spot on the right eye is in a different position than the image of the red spot on the left eye. So in fact, the brain would see two red spots. But if the left eye were to turn further inwards and the right eye would to turn further inwards, then the red spot would fall in the middle of that nice, in the middle of those yellow lines, and the brain would be able to merge both images and create a perception of one image. Yeah, so before we mentioned the intrinsic muscles of the eyes, two of them control the amount of light that comes into the eye, the width of the pupil. Those are the muscles of the iris, and they're intrinsic inside the eye. And the other muscle is the muscle that controls the thickness of the lens, that does the accommodation and helps to make sure that the light that enters the eye falls on the retina and not forward or behind the retina. So it creates a clear image on the retina. So those are the intrinsic muscles of the eyes. But what we've talked about now about the angle, the convergence angle, is controlled by the extrinsic muscles of the eye. So the extrinsic muscle are attached to the eye, but they originate from somewhere outside of the eye. And there are six muscles. Each eye has 6 muscles, and we're not going to go deeply into them. We'll do that in later sessions. But in a very schematical way, the eye can be seen. You can think of the eye like the head of the femur inside the pelvis. It's like it works like a joint that has 3 degrees of freedom of movement. So the eye can turn around its axis right and left to look to the right and to look to the left. It can turn around its axis up and down to look up and to look down, but it also has a degree of movement of turning inwards and outwards. And we'll talk about those movements in later sections. But right and left is mostly from what we see here as the medial and lateral rectus. So when the nose is here, the nose is to the side of the medial rectus. So this is the right eye. We're looking towards the right eye. So the medial rectus would pull the eye towards the bridge of the nose. The lateral rectus will pull the eye towards the ear to look towards the side. The superior would pull the eye to look upwards. The inferior, not really, it's much more complicated than that. You'll see very, very much more complicated, but just for simplicity's sake for now, the inferior rectus would pull the eye to look downwards. And then there are these funny muscles that come from one muscle that comes then from underneath, and it never works alone. If it were to work alone, it would turn the eye around the pupil, which is actually a movement that we don't really do intentionally or consciously. And there's another one that comes from above and also attaches to the opposite way, so it turns the eye in the opposite way around its axis. But the muscles that do the accommodation, the muscles that bring the eyes towards the nose to be able to change this angle in order to see the red spot or beyond the red spot, or in order to look at your thumb and focus on your thumb and then to look on the wall behind your thumb, are the medial rectus muscles that pull the eyes towards the bridge of the nose in order to create that convergence angle. But you will see in later sessions, it's much, much, much more complicated than that. But we're not going to go into it today. So yeah, so forward and what's in front of us is a very dominant, or maybe our most dominant orientation and the way that we direct ourselves, but it is habitually constructed and can have in the habit of constructing that forward orientation. It may contain many, many, many biases and many inaccuracies, as we try to expose and reveal today. Okay. So I think this is a good time for allowing you to open your microphones if you have any questions. I would try to advise you to try to steer away for now from pathologies. Okay. The first reason is because I would probably not have an answer, not knowing enough about pathologies of the eye. And the second reason is that I'm more interested in hearing about your experience in the lesson. Okay? So, and of course, if you have something about a pathology, you can go ahead and ask it. It's not like your grade would not be affected.
May I jump in, Roz?
Sure.
Because this was incredibly powerful and revealing for me. And at the moment when you felt most confused, I had the most clarity because, well, I not
what
to
a
get,
relief.
not to, yeah, right. See, you're much better than you think. Not to get pathological about it, but I do not have binocular vision. Let me simply say that. So I use my eyes differently. My left eye is almost blind, and my right eye is a tiny bit farsighted. So when we got down into the, I guess we were on our forearms. We were in the Sphinx position, and we were rounding and looking down. Obviously, my nearly blind eye, which is a nearsighted eye that I use for reading, I was being turned to the right because my eye was looking for the floor, which is close at that point. And it was so powerful, and I could feel the contraction of my right side, which is very habitual. So the pattern, and then that's very emotional also. I mean, I will say that I had an experience with Elena Nitafor last year where she was observing our small group of 12 people, and she noticed my eyes, and I had the same experience today because I saw that pattern so clearly emerging. Amazing. And you know, how I was being told so strongly to the, and then when we stood up, of course, what's happening is I realized how I'm always trying to center my distance eye. So I'm turning to the left when I'm
That's right.
standing. So that was, so thank you. So,
That's right.
but
Fantastic.
so for those people who are wondering what it's like, and I think there were several people, I think Iris said she has an issue, and I think a couple of other people do. When you don't see binocularly, you're
Yeah.
constantly being twisted and turned
Yeah. Yeah.
so that you can center toward the front, as you said, you know, so you can be oriented to the front. And the only way to do that is to turn.
Yeah. But I want to say something about, again, one of the, from what I see with myself and with many people, that just like with analyzing, say, posture, okay? So you can say, oh, somebody who has, I don't know, fused vertebrae in his lumbar back, in his, right? He has fused vertebrae, so he can't do flexion extension in his lower back. Of course, you're going to see consequences from that fusion, right? It's a pathology that cannot change. And you can, make a list of those consequences that you're going to see and how it's going to restrict his turning, and he's going to, I don't know, do something funny with his hips, and the position of his head is going to be a little bit off. But then you look at everyone else who do not have fusion in their lumbar spine, and they also use their hips in a funny way. And they're also not rotating around their spine in the most elegant, optimal, and their head is also a little bit off.
Mm-hmm.
So I would make the same argument that, of course, having one eye that doesn't see at all is, of course, very dramatic and influences the entire organization in a very dramatic way. But I would make the argument that being biased towards the front in a way that that is just a little bit crooked in one way or the other, that having one eye that is somehow a little bit more dominant or predominant in orienting ourselves and so on, is something that you would find with everybody. We all have that non-optimal, non-ideal organization of orienting ourselves vertically above our spine and forward to orienting ourselves to what's in front of us, and to the sides to be able to turn and rotate, right? So,
Yeah, well, if I hear what you're saying, it's certainly, as practitioners, we should not let that limit our expectation of others.
That's right. That's
yeah,
right. So
I'm proof that you can learn to adapt to whatever your habits are. I mean, I've learned, I've lived with this my whole life, and I don't think anyone looking at me coming toward them down the street would say, "Oh, look how she's so turned this way or that way."
That's right.
To adapt.
That's right.
But if I hadn't discovered Feldenkrais 35 years ago, who knows?
That's right. Yeah, but what I'm saying is that it goes both ways. So even with the fused vertebrae in the lumbar spine, there is so much more to improve. So much of the self-image and so many things can improve with the fused vertebrae. So much can improve in orientation, usage of the eyes, self-image, even if one eye is not working. And the other way around, even if both eyes are working, from the optometry perspective, are working perfect, they are part of the habitual way the person uses himself. So that was so we're on the spectrum, and we're not leaving anybody out.
I have a question, Raz.
Yeah. Hey, Michael.
Hey, when I see a body part in my mind's eye, it's always from an angle, from a side. And actually, I remember I was thinking about this when I was playing cello, like 12 years old. I remember thinking that. but never really took it anywhere. So I'm wondering if you think it's an ideal to strive for to see the spine uh, in the middle, and if that requires depth perception.
So my my first my first experience of my first memory of being fully self-conscious, which was at the age of 9, I think. Of course, I have memories from before the age of 9, but like my first memory of like, whoa, like full self-consciousness in a way, had a visual, just like you said, had a visual angle to it. It had a visual component of seeing myself from a particular angle. Okay, so and I think we all have that all the time. Whatever we do, consciously and unconsciously, we somehow, because vision is so dominant, there's always a visual component to how we pay attention to ourselves, to, of course, to how we act automatically, but also to how we pay attention to ourselves. Now, regarding the question, should you change it or not? I think as always, the first step is just to reveal it, right? To become aware of it, and to be able to notice that, oh my God, every time I'm thinking about my hip or my back, or is it your spine, your, right, sitting next to the, playing on the cello and you're thinking about your spine, was it, Michael? Or thinking about yourself or the cello? What were you thinking about?
I mean, any body part.
Any body part. It's
I think
all
it's really interesting when you apply it to the eyeballs themselves, but let's just say the spine, which I'll see as if I'm looking from the left.
yeah. So just revealing that fact, right? And then making that picture even clearer. Oh, I'm looking at my spine from the left, right? And making that picture having an even higher resolution to it, and understanding or sensing how your eyes are involved, how your head is involved. Is it the left eye that's doing the looking from the left, or the right eye? And so on and so on. So it's very similar to what we tried to do today. I did not propose at any one point to try to change anything. Sometimes I asked you to do the opposite, just to expose how habitual or how non-habitual the opposite is, just to even further intensify how there is a habit of orienting, directing the intention, constructing the self-image from a particular visual direction. Now, once that is established enough and clear enough, and enough is very subjective, then you can, of course, try to experiment with something different. Of course. And that would be a major expansion of your self-image. It could be, a dramatic, non-habitual trial that might completely fail, or would need many approximations or steps in order to be built. But I think it's a fascinating perspective, because once you would try to change it, it would require a change in everything. Your entire, it's not just that you're looking from a particular angle, it's how you construct your self-image at that moment, right? So it would require a change of the entire self-image, orientation, directionality, usage of your eyes, everything. So I don't think you need to do it, but I think it can be a mind-blowing experiment.
You would say that, just speaking about like in regards to posture, for example, if we talk about ideals, we could say that a more ideally organized person would view themselves in the middle without a left or right bias. Or
Yeah, maybe, but the ideal doesn't exist. So I think it's more. I think it will be measured more um, in the terms of ease and the quality of the movement, or the quality. So, for example, I might find myself having my left eye more forward, and so I scan a part of my horizon, or I turn in a particular way more easily. But then when I try to go to the other side, it feels like my eye is still pulling me. It's not allowing me to turn to the other side. Does it need to change over to flip so that the other eye would be the dominant? Not necessarily, but at least that I could turn both sides with the same ease, right? That the dominance of one eye wouldn't continuously pull me towards one direction. So, you might have a bad knee. Again, I'm going to the mechanical skeletal analogies that are easier to, that might be more tangible. So you might have a bad knee. Does that mean every time you bear weight on that bad knee, you really need to, I don't know what, bend your torso and move your head down into the side? Is there really no other way to bear weight on that bad knee and to maintain the elongation of your spine a little bit more organized? Right? Could be. So I would say that the ideal should be more thought about or oriented towards, the general ease of initiating movement. One eye might always be the dominant one. One eye might be non-functional, right? Is not being used at all. Doesn't see at all. Blind in one eye, as Madeline mentioned. But should Madeline have the same ease of turning to the right and to the left, even though she has only one eye seeing, vision in one eye? I would say yes. Right? Should she have the same ease of looking up and down and all the diagonals? And should she be able to, we try to think about the ring of the horizon around us. Should she be able, of course, this is not personal, Madeline, but should she be able, I'm just using you as an example, be able to imagine that entire 360 degrees ring with the same ease to the right, same clarity, even though she has only one eye? Yeah. Potentially, right? Is that a good answer, Michael?
Yeah, thanks.
Right.
Can I ask for clarity on the anatomy?
Sure.
When you spoke of the ciliary muscles,
Yeah.
it's getting flatter when it's
relaxed.
relaxed. See, that doesn't make.
I know, it doesn't make any sense. I know. It's a hard one to understand. All the muscles in the body that are not straight, all the sphincters and curved muscles like the diaphragm, there are all these funky muscles that really you need to wrap your mind around to understand. What do you mean they pull this? How could they pull this way? They're not. So the ciliary muscles are one of them. Let's see if I can show it again. Not sure I'll be able to explain it correctly, but let's see. And it's also hard to find good images of it because it's really, really, really tiny. It is really tiny. Let's see. Yeah, it's hard yeah, this one. So this is the ciliary muscle. It's connected with like a band to the lens, but I'm not sure this diagram is. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, so maybe this diagram is a little bit better. Oops. Yeah, it's hard to see the mechanism of it. I agree that it's hard to see. Yeah, it doesn't. So, yeah, okay, so maybe this one actually shows. So you have to imagine that it's not from the right and from the left of the lens, but it surrounds the lens 130 degrees. Okay, this is the ciliary muscle connected to the side of the eyeball, and it has this bulging part towards the middle. And then when it contracts, think of the whole muscle mass from the 360 degrees around the lens. When it contracts, the muscle mass comes towards the center, like a sphincter. A sphincter, when it contracts, it comes towards the middle of the opening or the tube that it surrounds, right? It constricts the opening. So the entire muscle mass of this muscle comes towards the center when it contracts, and then these cords become, they have slack, they become loose, and then the lens becomes bulgy, and that's for looking at something that's close to you. When the muscle relaxes, the opening, the distance of the muscle to the lens actually becomes wider. Think of a sphincter that relaxes, right? We go to the bathroom, we relax our sphincters so that everything can go out. When we swallow, the sphincters in the esophageal sphincters relax so that food can enter our stomach. So the opening becomes wider, which means that these bands connected from the ciliary muscle to the lens are being stretched to the side from the relaxation of the muscle. And then the lens becomes thinner. And I know it's a little bit counterintuitive because you would think that the stretching of these bands would require something to contract. But no, they're actually being stretched by the muscle relaxing and the aperture becoming wider, again, like a sphincter. And that pulls the lens and flattens it, which is what happens in long distance vision. But don't feel bad if it doesn't, if it doesn't click in. Don't feel bad about it because it's a very tricky one, and there's something counterintuitive about the stretching of the lens by relaxation. It's like, yeah.
To see it while you were describing it, I started to see it like that's the instruction. So it's. Can you see me?
Yeah. That's right. So the distance between the middle of the palms of my hands becomes shorter. They come together as the ciliary muscle contracts, and that gives slack for the lens to be thicker. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Great.
I'm definitely going to have to ponder that one for a while.
Yeah, totally. And I'm sure there's great YouTube. I didn't look up YouTube videos to show the ciliary muscle. I am sure there is a good YouTube animation. Just look up ciliary muscle, and I'm sure there will be a good animation that shows that relationship between the muscle and the thickness of the lens. Okay.
Couple of interesting self-observations. I was really surprised at how inaccurate I was as to where my thumbs were, the two hands. And I realized that what I was basing my sensation on was the comfort of my two arms. So when I actually got my two thumbs together, it's like, oh no, that shoulder doesn't feel quite as good. And so that's my sense of that centering was based on a lot of it on my shoulders. So there's a pattern, and along with Madeline, I think I had that same sort of curving. And it's like, oh yeah, my right side bends more easily. And like I had a kind of like a split experience of looking, and I've been spending quite a bit of time lately on really examining that whole, the eyes going to where we're moving. And I almost felt like I was getting split vision. So one eye was following the movement, the other eye was behind me, looking through my back of my spine. So I had like two things going on at the same time.
Fantastic.
And then I had a wonderful moment where I was having images of flowers, of purple flowers. And when you said we were in the Sphinx, and when we were doing the spinal movements, all of a sudden the flowers changed. It was still purple, but it was like I was seeing, you know, just of internal imagery, and the imagery was changing depending on what body part we were looking at. So that was just like one of those, oh wow, lovely moments.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So I have no idea if I've changed or whatever, but I'm just learning more interesting things and phenomena.
Yeah. Great.
Roz, it's interesting to think about whether in development of this whole organization, habitual organization that we have, it's hard to, you know, you can't say, well, what leads and what follows, but it's interesting to think whether the orientation of the eyes is an accommodation to the spine, the anomalies in the spine, or whether the eyes, habitual use of the eyes develops first and the body follows. There's no way to answer that, but it's fascinating because I discovered, for example, that I had the feeling that my pelvis is turned slightly to the right and that my torso is turned slightly, upper torso is turned slightly to the left to compensate for that. Mm-hmm. And at the end of this, when we covered one eye and then the other, I discovered that my left eye looks pretty much forward, really forward. But when I cover my left eye, my right eye looks to the left a little bit. So it's like my left eye is expressing the whole organization that wants to be forward, but my right eye is somehow connected to my pelvis, or I don't know what. I don't know, you know. It was wonderfully confusing lesson.
Right.
You know, just threw everything into a cocked hat, like, oh my God, what's going on, you know?
Fantastic.
Because I always used to think my right eye was dominant. And in fact, if I look at my thumb and look past my thumb, it's the right eye image that I see more solidly. Mm. But my left eye behaves like it's dominant in many ways. So I don't know what's going on.
Fantastic. Great.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Katharina.
So is there any reason why you haven't from time to time added an eyes open variation in the ATM or afterwards?
Oh, like, yeah.
So as you have, when you have, I mean, I get that you get all these inner eye sensations better with eyes closed at first, but then why not add in the ATM sort of the actual function of looking to all the sensations and then try to differentiate that with eyes open? Is it just for?
Yeah. Well, you try to do that and tell me if it worked. And I'll put some money on it that once you'll have your eyes open, you would have a very, very, very difficult time to contain within your attention and your self-image those kinesthetic details that were exposed with your eyes closed, right? So I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it requires repetition. So the thing is that I know for sure that it takes, so the eyes are closed, of course, so the vision would not interfere and we would have our attention directed towards our self-organization and the image, et cetera, et cetera. And I know for sure that it takes time to reveal those patterns. And for some people, It takes a lot of time to reveal those patterns. It's confusing, and they're not sure if does it really want to go in a diagonal, or is it because he said that there should be a diagonal? Is it from me or from the teacher? Is it because I can do one diagonal when I think this direction, but then I can switch it. So, and you know, sensing the differences and revealing, do you have a bias or not, can be very challenging for some people. Some people feel it like right away, but for some people it's very challenging. So once you feel it and you know it's there, then for sure you can try to open your eyes and try to maintain that, you know, try to integrate vision into that. But it's much more complicated. And you know, it would be not for the first approximation. So if you do the lesson again, if you'll do the recording again, then for sure I think it will be relevant to, if you're curious about it, to try to open your eyes and then see, oh, can I integrate now vision with that pattern, and what does it mean, or does it become completely different in my perception?
But having thought about it like intellectually or whatever, conceptually, you see it in one line of like, it's one game, it's just the further step. It's not, because I'm not sure, I haven't thought about it that clearly, but it could also be that it's functionally and conceptually such a different thing to add the actual vision, that it's not just one step more in integration or an integrative act. That would just, but from the answer I got that you see it in one, like adding up.
Yeah, I think that's individual. I think some people would open their eyes and they would experience, oh my God, it's totally different. It's not an addition. It's not one step forward. Now it's like a totally different world. And it wouldn't be integratable in that, you know. And maybe for someone else, he would feel, oh yeah, that's the pattern, eyes closed, I get it. Oh, now I'll open my eyes. Oh my God, yeah, I'm looking that, right? And it would be an addition. It will be a linear progression for him.
Raz, I just want to share something. Hi, everybody. In the beginning of the lesson, I was driving, so I didn't put my my video on. But it was very interesting because I was doing it with my eyes open, just what she asked. And it was very interesting, although I was driving and listening, and my eyes was, and the minute you just said forward, I said, oh my God, I'm driving, I'm looking forward, but it's not the same. It's amazing. The fact that you just noticed, you know, while I was driving and I was moving my head, I suddenly noticed that my left eye is a bit, it's not in the middle. Even if I, here, maybe this is the answer to Katerina, that it's, maybe it's for us as teachers and practitioners that are aware, but then I came home and I did it with my eyes closed, and I saw that I was, my sense was right, that my left eyes really wasn't in the center, like my thumb. It was amazing. I started the lesson with my eyes open.
Driving.
Then so there you go.
Yeah, kids, don't try this at home.
No. But it's very interesting.
Yeah. So it is integratable with the eyes open, apparently.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I have to go, but it was
great. So thank you all. We would end the recording now.